Right, morning everyone. First of all, apologies. You are going to hear a lot of drilling into rock. Nothing that to be done about that. I'm now on a building site for the next few months, and it's right outside the window, and there's really nothing to be done about it. Um, well, that being said, no, there isn't, because I can't. In theory, I could try and set up somewhere else that would be less noisy, but that would be an awkward setup, and I don't know from day to day when it's going to be happening. So yeah, it's going to be a bit of a mess. Sorry about that. Um, it's horrendous. So you'll have to just tell me how it is. There's absolutely nothing I can do about it at this point. I've tried to shield it as much as I can. But what I thought we'd talk about, it's pretty much the only thing to talk about while Parliament is still in recess until it is next week, um, is the upcoming budget, because that's what a lot of the discussion's on. We've sort of moved on from the sort of fallout from the riots. The new noise isn't too bad, good, because it's absolutely deafening for me. But, so in terms of things that we've sort of had this month, obviously the riots, but, we're now sort of in the process of waiting. How am I finding the war within worth picking up? Yeah, it's very good. Waiting to see if any, and people have mentioned in the chat here, any of the organisers, we need the organisers to, find themselves being investigated here. There's also the Tory leadership contest, but do you know what? They've been a little bit quiet on that. That's been a little bit quieter. And then the other one is the budget, the first budget. And there's a lot of talk about, and I understand it as well. There's a lot of talk about, oh, this is just going to be austerity. Austerity is carrying on. And I totally understand why people would think that, because Labour themselves are making this big song and dance about the fact that it's going to be, it's a painful, like Keir Starmer said yesterday, a painful budget, and they've been laying the groundwork for weeks. Rachel Reeves made that statement in the House last month where she said, oh, look, there's this massive black hole they didn't tell us about, which was true, by the way. It was a massive black hole. Yes, yes, there is a drilling noise. There's going to be a drilling noise for the next 3 months, I'm afraid. It's nothing technical. Someone's actually drilling literally outside the window into bedrock. I didn't know it was going to be happening today. I knew it was going to be happening at some point. Didn't necessarily know it was going to be today. There's nothing I can do. I don't know. Right, I'm just going to have to assume it's okay for some people, because otherwise there's nothing to be done about that. But in terms of the austerity thing, is it an austerity budget? So, austerity, remember, is when spending comes down. It doesn't mean you cut spending in an area. It means actual overall levels of spending come down. So if Rachel Reeves says, when she announces her budget right at the end of October, when they've done the analysis on it, it's, the overall spending has come down, then it is an austerity budget. If it's gone up, then it's not an austerity budget. And in terms of like how that calculation looks in simple terms, obviously these things are never actually simple. So you've got the current level of spending, which obviously was set by the Conservatives. Then you have to remove the shortfall. So the shortfall, remember, the budget that the Conservatives set, Jeremy Hunt set last spring, had a shortfall. Now, we knew about the shortfall. That's different to what I'm calling the black hole. The shortfall is the difference in expected tax revenues and expected spending. And Jeremy Hunt dismissed the shortfall by saying, we're going to introduce spending cuts. So he had already said that they're going to introduce about roughly £20 billion worth of spending cuts. But he didn't say where. Didn't say where they were going to come, just that they would come. So this is why, over the election, economists were saying, well, I don't know. The economists were basically saying that Labour and the Conservatives were being a bit quiet about the fact that taxes were probably going to have to go up to fill the shortfall in. But then when Rachel Reeves came to the House and talked about this £22 billion black hole, people thought that meant the same as the shortfall. It's not. This is a different thing. This is something else that the Conservatives had not mentioned about, and they hadn't told the OBR, the Office for Budgetary Responsibility. So that's why the Office for Budgetary Responsibility are now saying, they've written to the Treasury saying, why did you lie to us? Why did you conceal this information from us? So that's an extra thing, that black hole. Now, Keir Starmer has yesterday said that they're going to have to deal with that immediately. So the first budget is going to have to fill the shortfall in and the black hole in. And in actual fact, the manifesto does say that as well. It was in the manifesto that the budget will, not over a period of time, immediately close any gaps. Now, you know, there's many of us on the left will go, well, you don't need to do that economically, but it's like, okay, but they felt they needed to do so politically, right, to win the election. So they've promised it, so it's going to happen. So in theory, if you go, okay, so now we've got to take account of this shortfall in this black hole, that would mean overall spending is going to have to come down, unless instead of cutting spending, you raise taxes. So in terms of raising, and we know that Labour are going to raise taxes, they're heavily hinting at it. I mean, the thing, okay, there's two types of tax rise coming in this budget. The first is the one they'd already talked about, because they, you know, they said, sorry if the drill is being really bad for some people. I'm just seeing some comments, and if I'd have known it was going to be like this morning, I would have set up on the laptop somewhere else. You would still have heard it, but it would have been quieter. But I can't. It's too awkward to keep doing a thingy set up like that when I don't know. But so there's two types of tax rise. Because first of all, the Tories are saying, oh, Labour promised they wouldn't put up taxes. Like, no, they didn't. No, they said they would put up taxes. And if you go into the manifesto on page 10, which is like, it takes them 9 pages to talk rubbish, right? It's only on page 10 when they start talking about policies. So the very first page where there's any policies on it, which is page 10, it's their 6 first steps. In those 6 first steps, there's 3 tax rises. There's the VAT on private school fees. There's the windfall. I mean, the windfall taxes is like 2 in 1, because first of all, they're going to apply them more robustly to oil and energy companies. Secondly, they're going to increase the rate as well. So although the Tories in theory applied a windfall tax on oil companies, there was a lot of like loopholes in it. So Labour are going to close some of those loopholes, and they're going to put the rate up as well. So it's put a notice on the screen about the noise, blame it on the Tories. I can blame it on the Tories, actually. You're joking, but I actually can. And do you know why? The reason this is, it's not the reason it's happening, but the reason it's happening now, this should have been done. This building work should have been done months ago. You know why it's not been done months ago? Because of actually, technically, it was the architect's fault. He was an idiot, right? But nonetheless, it was the planning process, convoluted planning process that we obviously need to get planning permission. And technically, because Labour are easing and making that a lot easier to get, you never know. If we'd have done this in a couple of years' time, we may have got it done much more quickly, and therefore it could have been done by now. But it still would have been done at some point. I can't blame the noise on the Tories, just the fact that the noise is happening right now. Maybe I can. Maybe I can't. Use the headset. There was, like, with this microphone, I actually do have a sort of shield there, which will be cutting out some of the noise. If I used a headset, I would get none. That you cut none of it out. You'd get the full force of it, like I'm getting now. But so yeah, in terms of tax rises, there were some tax rises Labour had already talked about, cutting down on tax avoidance schemes, things like that. Then there are the taxes they didn't talk about, but we sort of suspected were coming anyway, capital gains tax, stuff like that. So if we have a look, because remember, we've got a £22 billion black hole that Labour need to fill. Let's have a look at what sort of things they could do. And there's lots of things they can do, by the way. In fact, the Financial Times, I read the Financial Times, and there's been articles by various professors of economics going back months in terms of what Labour could do to raise a few billion here, a few billion there. But in fact, and some of it they can do, and some of it they won't be able to. Some of it won't be able to do politically. There was an article actually in The Guardian, not the Financial Times, this week, where it had various, it was the Fabian Society in The Guardian who'd come up with some things that Rachel Reeves could do. The Fabian Society, for those who don't know, by the way, is a Labour supporting think tank. And now some of the things they proposed Labour wouldn't be able to do. Because, like, for example, Labour have promised not to increase national insurance, and one of their proposals was not raising the rate of national insurance, but it would still have amounted to an increase in national insurance. So, that wouldn't be sense. And some other measures as well, although in theory they do the job, would have some drawback that you wouldn't want. So there we go. How about a Conservative tax you pay if you vote for the Tories in the last election? Yeah, it's a secret, you see. And also it would be very naughty. But there are things they can do. I jotted a few down. So we know some of them already. So the first three are already known. So VAT on school fees, windfall taxes, going after people who... In fact, there is actually what I noticed. Dan Needle, for those who don't know, Dan Needle is a tax lawyer, but he also he heads up an organisation that shines a spotlight on dodgy tax affairs. And one thing he was saying recently, there's this company that's basically been offering dodgy tax avoidance schemes, and HMRC are now investigating them, which means by definition they're investigating everyone who's used those schemes. So there's now quite a few businesses who thought they were being clever getting out of paying tax who are going to maybe find themselves under investigation. And the fact that you were advised by a company that what you're doing was legal doesn't necessarily mean it was. I mean, although we say tax avoidance, and tax avoidance is technically legal, some tax avoidance scheme, or that are presented as tax avoidance schemes, are not, right? So there'll be some money raised that way, although I don't know how much you'd be able to say in a budget, because to me it's like, yeah. But in terms of the ones that weren't mentioned in the manifesto, capital gains tax, that's believed if you bring that in line with income tax, you would raise an extra £8 billion a year. Limiting Bank of England interest. So Bank of England pay interest on the money they require banks to basically have to make sure, in case of another global crisis, that cash flow can continue. And it was argued a long time ago that the Bank of England do not have to pay interest on as much of it as they are doing if you bring it in line with other countries. So that they reckon limiting the interest that the Bank of England pay on those deposits basically would save, I think the actual figure is 55 billion over 5 years. So I'm going to work that out as like an average of 11 billion a year. Anti-tax avoidance, that is. Oh, sorry, and it's tax. Sorry, spelling mistake. Typo, sorry. But there we go. So, yeah, capital gains tax and limiting the Bank of England interest alone would, on their own, provide an extra £19 billion a year of headroom. But there we go. Osborne is proud of Reeves, he says. He'll say all sorts of things. I wouldn't worry too much about that. What I am saying is that the chances of this being an austerity budget are actually quite slim. Because you'll ask... Oh, actually, I'll do this super chat first before I go into this next point. Bascar there, £5 super chat, thank you. It says, employment support allowance system needs to be changed. It's not fair, makes people feel suicidal. Okay, so there are a lot of things that do need to be changed. And I am going to say not everything is going to be changed straight away. What I would certainly suggest, for my money, that there should be a greater focus on things. So you mentioned one area that needs major reform right now because people's lives are actually at risk. I could bring in the fact one thing I talked about on my channel a while ago was the excluded, for example. So during 2020, when we had the furlough scheme, there were millions of people who were excluded from that furlough scheme. And it was a political decision. Rishi Sunak said in the House of Commons that it was a political decision. And some of those people, there has already been people take their own lives and attempts at it. And that's still going on now. So that's what, in terms of the people who are really at the sharp end and they can't afford to wait a few more years, I would definitely say that the government should be putting a particular focus on those. Whether they are or not, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I couldn't say. What I will say is that it doesn't make any sense for Labour to be accused of austerity. And then you ask yourself, so why are, and this is a good question because it's not some, I can come up with a speculation. Why are Labour painting this budget coming up as painful and, tough choices and stuff like that, when at the end of it, you could actually find that spending's gone up, that they've actually boosted spending. And all the tax rises, remember, they're not on ordinary people. These are on wealthy people. What are the tax rises we're talking about? Capital gains tax, 3% of people pay it, right? So some people may say, yes, but every now and then, like an ordinary person pays capital gains. Like there was the talk over Angela Rayner's house. In theory, she might have had to pay capital gains tax. She may not. She was told she wasn't. She didn't have to. But in theory, you might have to if you sell your own home, like your primary residence. There's no capital gains. But if you sell another home, and that can happen if two people have their own home and then they get married or for whatever other reason move into it with each other, and one of them sells their property, maybe there's capital gains. They wouldn't pay any more because we're only talking about bringing capital gains tax in line with income tax. And at the moment, it's already in line with income tax if you only have a few thousand in capital gains. So the people who would pay more tax as a result of bringing capital gains tax in line with income tax are those who are getting like hundreds of thousands or millions in capital gains. So it's a tax on the wealthy. The same thing with inheritance taxes, like 4% of people pay inheritance tax. They could actually raise the threshold of inheritance tax, protecting those richer middle class people, but just make the people further up pay it. So there we go. Labour had the fascist riots to deal with too. The critics are just biased against them. Well, to be honest, that was an issue for largely Shabana Mahmood, Yvette Cooper and Keir Starmer. I don't know that would have affected Rachel Reeves as such, other than the fact that as a result of those riots, we're going to find that the first few weeks in August will have taken a bit of a hit economically because people weren't going out to the shops. We knew that there was 20% fewer people going out, even when the high street hadn't had the shit kicked out of it. There were 20% fewer people going out shopping. We're going to pay an economic price for that. So not only are we paying a price that you've got a load of people who are going to prison, so some of those will have had jobs, so they're not going to do those jobs now. We're going to have to pay for them in prison. And the damage done to the high streets. There's an economic cost to all this. I don't know what that's going to end up being. Chris saying, painful. What style means is rich people who the Tories let off in the past will have to contribute. Do not assume painful means little people as usual. I will say there will be some things. I think the pain will be real in some other ways as well. I think there will be some things that don't get done that we think really should get done really quite quickly. The rebuilding programme for hospitals and schools, for example. I get the impression that's going to be delayed a bit. So there will be some of that. But I think the emphasis on the painful budget is less about actual pain and more about emphasising the fact that Tories have left us in this mess. Because this is how I see the narrative building for Labour. They're trying to say the Tories have left us in this massive hole, this massive thing. We're going to have to implement this painful budget. And if you don't want a painful, but after we've done this, then it should be much better. But if you don't want another painful budget like this in the future, stop voting Tory. I think it's an anti-Tory narrative, this. Rather than actually getting ready I get how the language used would also make sense if they were talking about, you know, overall cuts, which is why, again, if people talk about, oh, it's just austerity continuing, I'm like thinking, well, I don't think it is, but I do understand people saying that because Labour are doing nothing at all to suggest otherwise. But anyway, Ivan Ambrose, 499 super chat, thank you. What is it with some people who unreasonably expect everything to be put right the very second Labour come into power? I mean, there's two sides to that. First of all, yes, you're right. You can't wave a magic wand and change everything overnight. Another thing Starmer said yesterday about the prisons, he says, I can't build a prison by Saturday. But at the same time, there is also an element, like at the moment, you've got various groups who are going, we want this, we want this. You know, it's just been mentioned about employment support, for example. There are lots of things that need fixing. And Labour can fix some of them sooner than others. And obviously, all of these things that need fixing all have the people lobbying for them. And all of those people want their thing to be fixed first. Perfectly reasonable. So it's fine to have a lot of stuff in the news and the media of various groups saying they need to fix this and they need to fix this and they need to fix this. And whatever Labour don't fix straight away, those people will complain. And that's fine. That's reasonable. I don't have a problem with that. Because at the end of the day, nothing will get fixed if you haven't got people lobbying for it. So that's absolutely fine. But in terms of, in terms of people in general, they can only fix so much straight away. They have already, worked towards fixing. I mean, in terms of the spending, public sector pay going up significantly above the level of inflation for some people, but above the level of inflation for all public sector workers. And remember that Rachel Reeves has made it clear, like from my point of view, that should happen anyway, because why shouldn't public sector workers be properly paid anyway? But Labour aren't coming at it from that point of view. They're not coming at it from the point of view of there's a moral imperative to restore pay to decent levels again. Labour are coming at it from the point of view of, first of all, there's a cost in allowing strikes to continue. And second of all, it's a recruitment policy as well. There's shortages in these areas. They need to recruit staff. So in order to recruit staff, you have to offer a more competitive wage. Well, the thing about offering a more competitive wage in the public sector as a recruitment policy is it will put pressure on the private sector to also... Now, some companies in the private sector do offer decent wages, right? There are some decent companies out there, but there are other ones who are not. So by Labour increasing public sector pay, not only are public sector pay workers, you know, more able to afford the cost of living, which is always nice, but they're putting pressure on some parts of the private sector to make sure their own wages go up a bit as well to be competitive. So all of this increases the income that ordinary workers are going to be having. Should get the mic Graham has, works well for Graham. I mean, I do have another microphone switched to. It won't help in this particular situation because the volume hasn't gone down on this. There's the drilling. There's not a lot. And in fact, if I'd have had the other microphone, actually, which is a better quality microphone in theory, it would be worse for this. But I may try it anyway, because I might be able to shield it better. But anyway, who do I think controls the messaging in this country? That's actually a really good question. It's not clear. Pat McFadden, you would think, is the main one. He has run a lot of Labour's messaging before it formed government. Now, there is a lot of talk about various argy-bargies between various senior people around Starmer at the moment. You'll have probably read about potential conflict between Gray and McSweeney, for example. But say a more directional one might help. It sort of is. Honestly, the drilling... So the drilling is literally a metre from me, which means it's bouncing off all the hard walls in here and back into here. So the directional... It's just physics. But there we go. It's going to be like the scene from Total Recall, and that's Arnie outside. It sort of is. And it is literally out. What I mean is it's literally outside. When I say outside, I don't mean on the street. I mean I'm a metre away from the drill. Which means the microphone's a metre away from the drill. Yeah, it's not. There's nothing I can do. But surely Reeves will have to reassess the winter fuel allowance. The threshold is way too low. It can lead to more field hospital beds strain the NHS would for the elderly. So, okay, in terms of reassessing the winter fuel allowance, they won't reassess the policy because that would be mad. Now that they've announced it, they would look ridiculous if they didn't. And also, there's lots of pensioners who absolutely do not need the £200. That being said, the threshold absolutely. And when it was first announced, I raised two objections. The first is that there are people who qualify for pension credit but don't get it because they don't realise. Now, what I said is the government should make sure people are getting it. Now, what I will say is that the government have done that. So they've launched a scheme to try to contact pensioners and basically say to them, check if you are eligible for pension credit. You know, this is how you apply for it, stuff like that. Now, hopefully that will be made easy because there will be some people who, if you just say to them, go onto this website and they don't have access to the internet, that's not good. So hopefully the government are also making sure it's easy to do, but at least they look like they're getting in touch with those people. And those people will actually get more because they haven't been getting pension credit. So they will then get their winter fuel allowance and they will get pension credit on top, which they haven't otherwise been getting. So they could end up with more out of this. Remember that people on pension credit that are 80 years old or more will get more anyway because they'll go from £200 to £300. But my other concern was, is pension credit really the right level? Because remember, the level at which you qualify for pension credit, who set that? The Tories, right? Plum Duff, £50 super chat. My goodness, thank you very much. Have a wonderful wedding. Thanks for all you do, Phil. Yes, I won't have a wonderful wedding. I'll have a wonderful day after the wedding. I don't like social occasions. So social occasions where I'm the centre of attention is like, I tried to say to my fiance, because she's aware that I'm not looking forward to it, and she keeps trying to say, oh, it'll be nice, it'll be this, and it'll be that, and it'll be fine. And I keep saying to her, this is like spiders. This is like me dumping a load of spiders on you. She doesn't like spiders, but she's an arachnophobe. This would be like me dumping a load of spiders on you and saying, it's going to be nice. No, it's not. But I will just get through it. But thank you very much for that anyway. What do I think of the rumours of council tax bans being replaced with a property value thing? I don't know that there's a rumour. There's been lots of people suggesting it should happen, and I think I talked about this before. The advantage of shifting tax more to a sort of property tax, a land tax, rather than an income tax, is, and there was and again a professor of economics talking about this. I think I did it in a stream last week, didn't I? The advantage of putting more emphasis on land tax rather than income tax is when you tax income more, you do actually affect productivity. So, for example, a business, if you put up tax too much, will not invest. So when we talk about, oh, if you tax the rich too much, they'll take the money elsewhere. There's a point at which that is true. It's just not true for as much as you say there. There is a point at which that is true. Whereas with land, they can't take the land somewhere else. It's like, if you own land in this country, you pay tax on it. And you can also use taxation to make them use the land properly. So at the moment, if you've got someone who buys land for development but then doesn't develop it for years because they're waiting for the better market conditions, you can say, well, we'll charge you more tax for having this land that you're not using. And then we'll charge you less tax for using land that's of some benefit. Question there saying, how did I handle being a teacher, being such an introvert? Because I'm not shy. Introversion is not necessarily the same as a lot of introverts are also shy. I'm not shy. So I'll give you an example, right? So if let's say you've got this big room. So when I went to that I went to a YouTube thing a couple of months ago, and a load of people there, don't know them. I just sat in a corner, right? I just sat in a corner, and a couple of people came and talked to me. That was fine. I was happy to talk to them. I just sat in a corner, right? But if someone had said, if it was my job to have gone round all of those people asking how they were or something like that, I'd have done that. I'd have had no problem with that because there'd be a purpose to it. I'd be doing it as part of my job. I just don't like it if it's just purely for social purposes. Like in my brain, it goes, well, there's no reason for that. My brain will happily do something for where there's some purpose, and then if it doesn't see the purpose in it, my brain just sulks, or it's just stubborn. It just goes, no, I'm not doing that. But anyway, why are Labour not getting rid of free ports? I suspect because they've been done now, and if you and what do you do to get rid of them? So, but they have said there's not going to be any more, and there is also, you know, they're going to make, well, there's, because we're going to have this sort of extra body measuring value for public money, they should be under more scrutiny. But ultimately, that'll be it. They will go at some point again. I mean, remember, the Tories got rid of the last lot. They're just going to go again. But that's George super chat. Anyway, thank you. And then there was Gary Arnold, £5 super chat. Have a great day, Phil. Thank you very much. Like I keep saying, I won't, but I will attempt to. I will have a great Friday because we've got food in. Nice food. Can we get any Rwanda money back? No. They've actually said so. You know, so you might be thinking the Rwanda government had actually said, oh, we're sick of this. If you want your money back, you can have your money back when the Tories were in power. As soon as Labour came to power, they went, yeah, you're not having your money back. Yeah, you're not having it back. So no, that's gone. But at least we're not giving them any more. It's finished, done. But there we go. Yeah, Samantha saying I'm introvert and really shy. I mean, you can be. You can be shy. You can be shy as an introvert, or you can be not shy. I'm not shy as an introvert. I just, you know, it's like it's the social. It's like you have the just social, and anything you can do. And it's weird to people who are not like this, but it's the same because you think it's the same activity. You're doing the same thing, but just for two different purposes. Why would it? If it's for social purposes, I just don't do it. But there we go. Council tax should have a lot higher bands, especially for mansion supplement. Well, the problem with council tax, I'll leave this as the last point, since they seem to have stopped for a moment. The problem with council tax is it's in theory supposed to be based on property values, but it's not. Because it was based on what property values sort of were 40 years ago, or 30 years ago, 35 years ago, something. A long time ago. It doesn't work anymore. So you do need to make sure that it's updated. But also, again, this article I was reading by, and you know, this was again a professor of, I think he was actually a Nobel laureate, in fact, who'd actually suggest, the problem is I've read so many things from different economists. Some of them are Nobel laureates, some of them aren't, but I think this particular one was. And they were actually sort of saying with AI, you could actually do it more accurately now in terms of property prices. But also they were saying you could actually bring, because then you'd think to yourself, oh, if they put council tax up, people go mad. You could actually bring it down. So you could abolish council tax, replace it with a land tax that works out cheaper for people who just are living in a home, but still brings in more revenue because there's a lot of land out there that's that's not taxed, that people own and is not taxed. And you could make exceptions for, obviously, farmland would be a real hot potato. You wouldn't do that. So you'd make that exempt. You could make certain things exempt. Obviously, schools and things like that exempt as well. Ivan Ambrose, £4.99 there. No, you're not looking forward to the day, Phil. I wish you a really happy marriage. Yes, the marriage will be very happy, I'm sure. Thank you. But we'll have to leave it there. We'll leave it there, and I'll just try and hope. I'll try and find out how long the bedrock, because obviously not going to dig into bedrock for several months. It's building project, and then see what I can do about that for the future. But that will be for next week, because Graham will be on for the rest of the week now, because I will be otherwise engaged. Pardon the pun. But have a great day. Don't forget to click the like button and subscribe to the channel. And until next time, I'll see you later.